Hi, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about the making of Bard's Tale construction set. That was the first game I made at Interplay, and I was a contractor. I didn't get hired until after the game came out. The way it all came about in late 90, my father passed away. We weren't terribly close. My parents had divorced when I was young. But the impact of having a parent die, especially, he was only 57, he's my age. And I thought I was 24, I was 25. And I was still in grad school, and it just made me rethink what I wanted to do. I was on course to become a college professor. I rethought that. I had so much fun making Grand Slam Bridge, and I'd never stopped making games. In fact, I'll do a video about I got really involved in the mud scene, multi-user dungeon. I'll do a whole video about that because ironically it ties a little bit into Fallout. But what I did was in early 91, I went to the bookstore and bought several computer gaming magazines, like Computer Gaming World, PC Gamer, I forget which ones they were. And I went through the ads, and every video game company that had an address, I sent a resume to. I don't remember how many I sent, but I got two responses. One was 360 Pacific, which I think was in Oregon. The other one was just a few miles from where I lived. I was on campus at UC Irvine, and over in Santa Ana was a company called Interplay, which I'd heard of. And I had played Bard's Tale 2. I hadn't finished it because I was into the gold box games, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play this. So I responded. They responded to my letter. I called them up. I talked to someone named Tom Decker, who later on I would work for, and I got an interview. I was so nervous about the interview that I went to a friend of mine, John Roy, and asked if I could borrow one of his suits. And he gave me this really fancy, expensive Italian suit. And oh man, it fit so well. I was like, this is a nice suit. I went in for the interview. The receptionist thought I was their insurance salesman. So as soon as I walked in, she says, oh yeah, your appointment's very soon. I'm like, great. I sat down, and then she said, okay, you'll be meeting with so-and-so from HR. And I'm like, shouldn't I be meeting Tom? She goes, what's your name again? And I told her, and she said, oh, I thought you were our insurance salesman. No programmer shows up here in a suit. By the way, Jesse Reynolds showed up for his interview a few years later at Interplay in a suit. And yes, I made fun of him for it. Anyway, so I had my interview with Tom, and he told me there was someone else who had applied for the job, and she and I were neck and neck. We had about the same amount of experience. I think she might have even made a game before, and I had one game under my belt already. I had Grand Slam Bridge, published by Electronic Arts. By the way, that was the interview where Tom actually looked. He owned a copy of Grand Slam Bridge, and he looked at it, and my name was not in the credits, and that's where I found out. I was really upset. He said later that he believed that I worked on it because I looked so honestly upset that my name wasn't there. But what sealed the deal for this job was he said it was for Bard's Tale, and that it was, like D&D. And I said, oh, I play D&D all the time. And he said, can you tell me what THACO is? I was very excited. I proceeded to tell him that THACO stood for two-hit armor class 0, that for the classes in D&D, there were 4 THACO tables based on the base classes of fighter, cleric, thief, and magic user. Then I told him what the THACOs were for level 1 against ACs, what the number was for the THACO, and said, and the trick is you can take whatever your armor class is and subtract it from THACO to get your two-hit value. So if the THACO's 18, then AC 10, you only need an 8. And I said, but it doesn't work for a magic user because THACO's repeated 6 times, and that isn't the first 20 on the magic user column. Tom had been quiet during this entire exuberant explanation, and he said, yes, THACO is two-hit armor class 0. That's all he wanted. Found out later that the other programmer, she didn't know what THACO was, and He was impressed and a little taken aback at how detailed my answer was, but he said, "Yes, you certainly play D&D." So I got the contract. It was a 14-week contract, 14 weeks to make Bard's Tale construction set using the code from the original Bard's Tale, which I was told was a black box, meaning I should be able to lift that code up, set it down, and just shove new data into it. So what they really were hiring me to do is to write editors for data, so that the player of Bard's Tale construction set could create an item or a monster or a new spell and just fill in data. Problem. I was supposed to come in every 2 weeks. A few days later, I called Tom and said, "This code is not a black box." I actually drove over, it wasn't too far away, and I showed him, like, buried deep in the combat code, there was a line that said, "If monster equals 59, then do dragon breath." This is all C code. It was so not a black box. I mean, there's no way I could use that. There's no way that combat code could be considered a black box. Who knows what monster 59 was going to be? And obviously it was a dragon, but there was no enumerations for types. Monsters didn't have a drop down for a type, didn't have an enumeration set in them, so I could go, oh, this type is dragon, so let's see if it's time to do dragon breath. All the rules for like how often something could happen, like how often you could be dragon, was hard coded, so there's no way to change it. And these were all things they wanted done. There was another problem too, is they couldn't find the source code for the version they wanted me to build it off of. I think they wanted me to build it off of Bard's Tale 2. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3, but they couldn't find the English version, so they gave me the German version, and I don't read German. And yes, the strings were embedded in the code. So I was like, I can't do this. This can't be done in 14 weeks. So first I got the spiel, well, you agreed to do it in 14 weeks. And I said, you agreed it was black box. So I will do what you asked for, but it won't work. I will write editors for data and put it into the code that you said was black box. It won't work. But if you're going to stick to the letter of this contract, so will I. That kind of worked. They assigned another programmer to do when you're playing Bard's Tale, there's some data up here, there's rolling text here, and then there's a picture here, and the picture is animated. So if it might be a person pretending to talk, it wasn't lip synced. It might be a monster, doing this. They got another programmer, Phil Britt, to do all of that. And that was actually a lot of work because, again, that wasn't something that was easy to extract in the code. But also, I wasn't really that up to speed on PC graphics. If this was an Atari, boom. It also meant that he interfaced with some of the artists a little more than I did. I talked to Todd Camasta, who was their 2D art master. Todd was an amazing artist. And I did things like the menus and editors and things like that. But Phil worked with them on all the animations. So that was great. That freed me up to basically spend weeks. And I was doing this all in my dorm at UCI. And there wasn't room anywhere else. So I pretty much threw everything off my desk in my bedroom and plopped a computer down, which they supplied because my PC couldn't handle this. It was in VGA, not Super VGA, but my computer was EGA. That's how old things were. Oh, and Bard's Tale Construction had to run in VGA, EGA, and CGA. CGA was 4 colors, and you didn't get to pick them. It was black, white. They were called cyan and magenta. Even back then, my color vision was so bad, it kind of looked like an off-white, and then this pukiest purpley color that I've ever seen. I don't know who picked those, some insane person. But it had to run in all 3 of those modes. Luckily, the resolution was the same. So it was 320 by 200, either in 4 color, 16 color, or 256 color. Honestly, I really think it only looked good and played well in VGA, but they just wanted to support it to make it backwards compatible. So I went back to doing all this work. Funny story. The very first check they sent me bounced. I got paid when I went in every 2 weeks to say, Tom, they paid me a check at some point. I forget how many weeks in. I took it to my bank. The next day, the bank called me and said that check bounced. And I was like, oh, and they said there's a fee for it bouncing. I was like, oh, called up Interplay, talked to HR. The woman there apologized, said that they had such a constant payroll amount that she forgot to increase it when they brought me on as a contractor. She issued me a new check plus the amount of the bounce fee. Everything was good. She was mortified. I was like, look, it's fine. It's fine. I didn't tell her that as a grad student, I pretty much lived, paycheck to paycheck. And now that I was doing this job, I didn't sign up to be a TA, teaching assistant, which I normally did every quarter, which that was interesting because even though I was an AI grad student, I ended up TAing programming languages, operating systems, because that one was at 8 in the morning and I was the only one who'd get up that early. A whole bunch of things that were not AI related, but I didn't do that anymore, so I could do this. Anyway, we finished it. There was quite a big bug push at the end, but we had really good QA. That was where I met Chris Taylor. When I'd go in every 2 weeks to talk to Tom, Chris Taylor would often come in and just stand there and listen. And I didn't know who he was. He would just stand there at the wall going, and it turns out he was just really excited about this being made. Kind of wanted to be part of it and just loved coming in and having me say every few weeks, this feature's in, like you can do this, you can do this, you can make maps, you can make spells, you can make traps, you can make monsters. We finished it up, got it debugged. It shipped in the fall, I want to say October of 1991. The first game I'd had out since Grandstand Bridge in 86. It got reviewed in the Dragon magazine a few months later, and it got 5 stars. I was stoked. I mean, I had a subscription to Dragon magazine. Have a game with my name on it in Dragon magazine. That was cool. So, of course, that was so much fun. Went home for Christmas break, back to Virginia, visited my family, came back, and basically told Tom, I want a full-time job in the game industry, and I hope it can be at Interplay, because that's where I want to do it. I want to make more RPGs with you guys, but I'll send my resume out if that's not possible. And Tom went to bat for me, and I got the job. So that is the story of the very first game that I ever made for Interplay.